We all remember the year 1997 for very different reasons. For some, it was a year defined by the tragic death of Princess Diana. For others it was a time of celebration or commiseration as Bill Clinton took to the Oval Office for his second term and Tony Blair became the UK's first Labour leader in 18 years after a landslide victory. For Julie Kemp, it's a year she can never forget, but for none of the aforementioned reasons. On October 19, 1997, Julie's life changed forever after the car she was traveling in with her husband and son was crushed by an off-duty ambulance. Julie was traveling in the passenger seat of the family's Pontiac Sunfire as her husband, Andy, drove her and their 8-year-old son, Landon, home from church. The family, from Charlotte, North Carolina, were oblivious for the horror that awaited them as they approached the Mint Hill intersection. In fact, Julie is still not clear on what happened that day. All she can remember is the sound of her husband shouting as the off-duty ambulance came hurtling towards their car. Then everything goes blurry. I didn't see what he was yelling at. I didn't see the ambulance coming, but I remembered him yelling. That was the last thing I heard from him, Julie hauntingly recalls. Andy died upon impact after the ambulance T-boned the family car, sending it spinning across the carriageway. Julie, who had been sat on the opposite side of the vehicle, was severely injured, but alive. Paramedics who arrived at the scene knew there was nothing they could do for Andy, so they focused all their attention on ensuring Julie's condition was stable. With broken ribs, a collapsed lung and concussion, she was in a bad way. Meanwhile, Landon lay in the back of the vehicle in the seat behind his father. The car has been so badly damaged that it was impossible to tell that there was a third person inside. When the paramedics finally realized that there was a child in the car, only after seeing a young boy's shoe strewn on the road, they found Landon limp, unresponsive and not breathing. With little time to spare, they resuscitated him successfully before airlifting him directly to Carolina's medical center. Doctors were doubtful that he'd survive after he had to be resuscitated a further 2 times that same day. Landon has sustained serious injuries to his head, which led doctors to predict that if he did survive, he may be severely brain damaged. But Julie was not concerned by this bleak diagnosis, she just wanted her son to survive. I was so desperate that was okay. I would take that just to have him. He was all that I had, she explains. Meanwhile, Julie attended her husband's funeral, where she questioned the existence of God. I was very disappointed, heartbroken. And when I'm sitting at the funeral, I'm fussing at God. I don't understand why this happened. I don't understand why he didn't send angels to protect us. But in the very next breath I'm praying as hard to him as I've ever prayed in my life for Landon to live, she says. As a result of his serious injuries, Landon spent a great deal of time in a coma. He was hooked up to all kinds of machines to keep him alive, says Julie. I kept praying that he would open his eyes. 2 weeks later, Landon did just that. But as if that wasn't enough of a miracle, further tests found that he hadn't sustained any brain damage. Julie was overwhelmed by her good fortune, but this feeling quickly subsided when she realized that she'd have to tell her son that his father hadn't survived the incident. He had scars on his face, and his head was just full of hurt. And I didn't want to hurt him anymore. So I asked Landon, I said, Landon, do you know where your dad is at? Julie remembers. To her shock and surprise, Landon replied quick matter-of-factly. Yes, I know where he's at. I saw him in heaven, the young boy said. Then he continued to explain more of what he'd seen to Julie. He looked over to me and he says, oh Mum, by the way, I forgot to tell you. I saw your other 2 kids. And I just looked at him because I wasn't sure what he was talking about. But I had 2 miscarriages before Landon was born. And he saw them in heaven. We had never shared that with Landon. He did not know that we had lost 2 children before him. That wasn't all that Landon saw when he visited heaven. Talking years after the horrific incident, Landon, who now has 23 metal plates in his head, recalls. I remember being able to see my dad and his friend Olan Palmer, who had passed away less than a month before he did, also in a car accident, and Olan's son Neil Palmer, who had died on a four-wheeler years before. And it was funny because I remember us all like standing in a square. Never one of us said a word to each other, but we were just all standing there. It was almost as if like a preview of a movie to where you only get to see certain bits and pieces of things. Jesus came to me and told me that I have to go back to earth and be a good Christian and tell others about him. Talking of his encounter with his siblings, Landon simply says, "I knew that they were my siblings even though no one had ever told me about them." Just being in heaven, I guess you know your own, or you know who everyone is. The traumatic incident has certainly left both physical and mental scars upon Julie and Landon, but they're both thankful to have their lives. They were certainly very lucky that day.
Please share this video with friends and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories.